Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar today. My name is Robert Levin. I'm going to be your speaker today. Let me make sure my little thing is working. There we go. That's me. I'm sitting here with my friend and associate, Jeff Sykes.
Hello.
He's going to help me with questions, so please don't be shy about asking questions. If you ask questions, he's going to help me field them because I'm going to be busy trying to explain things to you. Let me share with you what I'd like to do today. I just want to tell you why I believe it's really important to protect yourself. That's me right there. I want to tell you what we're up against, what's really going on today. There's two things we need to concern ourselves with. One, of course, is protecting everything you've spent your whole life working for. And the other one is protecting yourself or you and your spouse while you're alive. And really, those are the two things that's important. And just so you have a little bit of information about me, I lived my whole life in California. And I came to Arizona a little over 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. I have two girls, Allison and Shayna, my wife, Kathy. And I just love it here. I'm very excited to be here. I needed an opportunity before I can actually come because I do have a family and responsibilities. So I just want to share you again why I believe it's important to protect yourself, what we're up against. So that's the agenda. If any of you are interested, of course, when I'm done speaking, and love an opportunity to answer questions or earn your business, just reach out and let me know. I'll supply a form for you. If you're interested, at the end of this, you can fill out that little form and hit the submit button, and we can move on. Okay. The name of the company is called Safeguard Estate. We're located in South Scottsdale. The owners of the company are Tom Perzak and John Owen. The office manager is Julie Jewett, excuse me. She's lived here her whole life. John and Tom have well over 25 years experience each doing this business. And I want to share with you that we're located in South Scottsdale, and I am not an attorney. I want to tell you that really quickly because Mark Hall is the attorney. So any legal answers I can't supply. I can share my experience with you. I've done this for quite some time. My last 18 years in California was mostly meeting with judges and attorneys and things like that. So Mark's the attorney, so anything I say is not legal advice. It might be answers Mark gave me or some of my experience. So we're in the same building, Mark and Safeguard, but we've separated it somewhat. So we do all of the customer service. We help you with everything, which allows us to provide ongoing services without the ongoing fees normally associated with the attorney. Mark's your attorney of record, and you have an attorney-client relationship with Mark and a customer service relationship with Safeguard. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's three groups of people that come to the workshops today. I would say the first group, of course, has nothing in place at all. No will and no trust. If you're going to protect yourself, those are your real options. It's either a will or a trust. And I'm going to explain the differences between those as well. So if you're interested, you can make an educated decision. So the second group, of course, would have a will in place with no trust, just a will. And the third group would have a trust. Now, our trusts happen to be full-blown estate plans. It's all included. So within the body of our trust, you have a will. Only difference is it's protected within the trust and has a different purpose, and I'll explain that as we go. All right. So I don't know if any of you have heard the term probate, but probate is a legal process. It's when a judge steps up and they're going to decide what happens with everything you've worked your whole life for. So it's your estate that goes through probate, not you. And the reason it happens is because you're not here to fix anything. If some hiccup arises, you're not here to tell them the way it's supposed to be. So the judge is going to decide for you. Probate's job is to establish ownership. That's what the job is. Ownership and title are the same thing, and I'll explain that as we go on. So in probate is the judicial process where a will proved in a court of law, and it's accepted as a valid public document, true last testament of the deceased. What that means is if you passed away, the judge gets to decide what your wishes were if your estate's in probate. Now you see that first line there where it talks about a will getting approved in a court of law. That's the first thing most people don't realize. Wills these days, if there's any hiccups, if there's any complications at all, if somebody argues a problem on paperwork, just anything, it's now in probate. Your estate's in probate, and the judges decide what happens with it. And probate brings with it fees and things like that. So, the size of your estate will get diminished, of course. But the first thing I wanted to share with you is that wills get approved there these days. It's not like it used to be. 20 plus years ago, if your parents or grandparents passed away, wills had the ability to support themselves. They can enforce them themselves. So if somebody argued, you just told them to be quiet or shut up, And if somebody went to court and made a claim, if you had a will, the judge told them the same thing. They didn't have a claim. It's just different these days, and I'll explain it as we go. So I set up an example here, and this is just a pie chart giving me an opportunity to explain to you how they associate the fees. Okay, so I came up with an estate that's worth $500,000. It's pretty easy to do if you own a house, but this is how the judge figures it out. What he does is he'll send an assessor to your home to figure out what it's worth. It's not a county assessor, it's his own assessor. Now they're still going to give you a fair value, but the problem is he's going to do it in his own good time. And if you're in probate 5 or 10 years later, you already have a value for that property. And that's the value he's going to use. So that's what they'll do. They'll come up with that evaluation. Then they're going to send probably 2 or 3 people into the home. They have to count and catalog everything. They need a value. So they add up t-shirts and silverware and everything else, and the privacy is now gone, of course. So they'll come up with that value. Then they'll find your money everywhere, wherever it is, 401ks or, insurance policies or bank accounts, but they just need a value of your estate. So they'll do forensic accounting of everything, and in this case, we came up with $500,000. Okay, so after that is when the work starts. Now the judge has to determine, did you have any taxes you owed, or did you have any debts, or even did you have children, and if you have children, of course, did you want to leave them anything, and so on. That's his job. So the usual costs for probates, the average cost, I would say, in Arizona is between 6 and 22% of your estate. So in this case, I tried to stay conservative. I went with 10%, and the truth is, it could be less. It tends to be more, but it very likely could be less. I don't have a crystal ball. I just, there's no way for me to know. But generally speaking, it's usually more. So in this case, I went with 10%. At 10% of $500,000, that's $50,000 for court costs, just like that. Here in Maricopa County, for instance, they have a what they call a transaction fee, $30. Well, if you're in probate for a couple of years and you have at least a couple of hundred transactions, that $30 added up to $6,000. So you see how the fees can accumulate. And there's a lot more than a couple hundred transactions usually in a court case. The average time in probate is 1 to 3 years, but it can go a lot longer, or in fact, it could be less. There's no way to tell. But again, the average time is 1 to 3 years. So that $50,000, that was court costs. Now you can go ahead and double it because the attorney generally makes at least as much as the court. Now we're at $100,000. Okay. I can't imagine any of you working your whole life think that 20% of your estate can disappear. And that's what we're talking about here. So again, at first we're talking about protecting your assets. Okay, so this is right off the Superior Court website of Maricopa County here in Arizona. At any given time, there are more than 20,000 active or pending probate cases here in Maricopa County, and more than 500 new cases being filed every month. And as you see, there's only 2 probate court commissioners. Now, if I was going to speculate, I think if they had 4, it would go faster. And of course, they would earn less money. Probate makes millions of dollars every year, not just for this county, but for the state. And every county makes this kind of money. And that's, generally speaking, what we're up against these days. They're happy to handle it for us. And that's how they look at it. They're doing it for us. If we didn't protect ourselves while we were alive, or didn't do it in a way that they think is appropriate, well, then they're going to do it for us. That's what it comes down to. And you're going to lose your privacy. You're in the courthouse. You're in the court system, I should say. So everything is in there. All your public information is now there. And anybody can look at it. And it doesn't cost them anything to look. If they want to make copies, it's pennies a page. And it says everything. Have you ever had any mental issues? Have you ever been in the hospital? Have you ever been arrested? where your kids are, their addresses, phone numbers, all their contact information, information about everything you own. It's all there. So you see how we're vulnerable. The judge is going to pick someone and he's going to call them an executor. Now, if you had a will and your will is in your estate's in probate, he might use the person you've chosen. He might not. It's his courtroom. There's no way to help determine what he's going to do. I've seen him do it both ways. But he's going to pick that person. He's going to make them reach into their own pocket to pay for an ad, and that ad has to run in 3 different newspapers. And it's going to say something like this, very similar or exactly, or maybe it's different, but generally speaking, he's going to have these ads run in these 3 papers, and they're all going to run for 6 months. And he's just going to tell everybody that you've passed away, and if they want to make a claim, come on and do it. Okay, if nobody shows up, you know, if you were here, you would count your blessings. But the fact is, we don't know, and there's people that might do this for a living. All right, so I don't see any questions yet. Please don't hesitate to ask me questions, but I probably get some, but please share. When you ask me a question, other people that didn't think of it will not only benefit from your question, but they'll benefit from the answer, and might create more questions that will help you too. So please don't be shy. All right. So we've talked about probate a little, so I'm going to share with you what I meant about title and ownership being the same thing, and generally how probate gets started. And then I'll talk about wills and trusts. All right. So I came up with this here. This is a husband and wife. They own everything. They own the money, the homes, the cars. It's all theirs. And if it's just you, then it's just you. If it's you and all of your brothers and sisters and friends, that's who it is. In this case, for my example, it's a husband and wife, and they own it all. Okay. Now, if one spouse passes away, in this case, I've chosen the husband because I never take out the ladies first. I'm sorry. But she's still here. And generally speaking, in Arizona, she's okay. I mean, most of the time, it's a community property state. You know, there are things that can, you know, cause issues. And it happens, but not always. So let's just say there's no issues. Nobody's making claims. Nobody's, as they say, coming out of the woodwork and so on. It's all still hers. She does have work to do, though. I mean, we've all had people pass away, and it's work. Sometimes it's a few months, sometimes longer, but in this case, it's just work. So now, when she passes away also, you see they both passed away. And that begs that question, right? Who owns it now? Well, the problem is we understand ownership and title are the same thing, but this is how they use it. We just took title to the grave with us. So for the moment, nobody owns it. And that's when probate gets started. That's when anything gets started. When you pass away, if it takes some time from the time you pass away until the bank gives it back to your beneficiaries for you, let's say, there's a lapse in ownership, a gap, and that time period is where your estate's vulnerable. That's what it is. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit as we go. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about wills. Wills are designed for probate. One of the main differences between wills and trusts, wills are probatable. A trust that's done properly is not probatable. In fact, you will avoid probate entirely. It just won't happen. If you get a properly done estate plan, everything I'm going to talk about cannot happen. You've avoided it all. And without it, well, you're vulnerable. That's the best I could do. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But when you see this number, almost 3/4 of all the wills in Arizona go through probate. I can't. See, the problem is they get approved in a probate court now, and for any reason at all. So if somebody argues, you have probate. See, the judge gets a moment in time to glance at a will. A trustee doesn't get to look at it, but a will he does. And if your kids are arguing for any reason, he doesn't tell them, oh, you guys, that's a silly argument. He has probate because that's his job. If a creditor shows up, if your neighbor or a stranger wants to make a claim, if there's a problem on paperwork at the county recorder's office or anything at all, you're going to have probate. In fact, the banks, credit unions, and savings and loans, they all hire people these days, 40 hours a week. All they do is read obituaries. If they see your name in the obituary, they will freeze the money and they will notify the probate court. So it only takes any hiccup. In fact, that situation I just described, I've seen it before several times. Probate isn't supposed to start. There's a threshold. And it's not supposed to start in Arizona unless you're worth $75,000 or more. And if you have a house, of course, you've accomplished that. But I've seen it start as low as $384 because they saw her obituary in the probate court. And my friend and my customer, it was his mom, and she lived on Social Security. And so they saw her name in there and they froze the money, $384. So he got a hearing date, and it took 8 months. He was Maricopa County. And when he showed up, the judge looks, and I'm going to summarize for you, but you don't have an attorney? No, Your Honor. What are we talking about? Well, she had a little money in the bank, Your Honor, and she had a few $100s in furniture in a rented apartment. The judge says, he pounds the gavel and says, you can have the furniture. Next. So probate can start for any number of reasons. Of course, it's a great platform for family arguments. You know, when we're really, really hurting, like losing parents, for instance, it's one of the most difficult things that's ever going to happen in your children's lives. It just is. And when we're really, really hurting, who do we take it out on? I mean, take it out on those closest enough to us that will listen. That's how it works. And public records. Again, you're in the public records. Okay. So I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say there's an unscrupulous guy that goes in there and says, I want to see a probate case, please. Who do you want to see? How about my neighbor? How about the last 20? Okay, so they can do any number of things. They can send things out, request for money, and maybe they send 20 things out and they get 2 back and they settle for some money. You see, you can make money every day at this, and a lot of money if they wish. So we're vulnerable is what I'm getting at. And wills can complicate things because, again, family conflicts, blended families, of course. You trust everyone in your family. That's one of the big questions, right? Do you trust everyone in your family or even strangers? The perfect example of the blended family is the Brady Bunch, right? It just happens. It's perfect, 3 and 3. And in this case, if he passed away and they came back and said, get out of Dad's house. Okay, it's almost never malicious. It just isn't. It's pain. When you lose your parents, it's pain. But mom's hurting too. And it's hard for mom to think, well, they just need a hug. It's really hard. It's really almost never malicious. It just builds up because people need something else to be upset about because losing your parent is too hard for them to fathom. That's all. And do you trust everyone? I got Gladys Kravitz here from Bewitched. I thought that was great. I mean, everyone. Let's say, anybody. If you have a family member, a cousin, a nephew, an uncle, would you trust them all with your whole estate? Because remember, they can go look it up. So that's wills, generally speaking. And again, please ask me questions if I've left anything out or you're confused in any way. I'm going to go ahead and compare wills to trusts now. I'll give you how a trust works and then a comparison so you understand it. All right, so a trust has 4 parts to it. There's an owner and a manager. They're the same people. Then there's a manager that replaces the owners, like an executor in a will. And then there's the beneficiaries. Okay. So the trustor is the owner. Now, that's you. You own it, and you're the trustee. You own it, and you manage it. See, the difference between wills and trust is really significant in how the foundation is. A will doesn't own anything. When you have a will, most people believe that they have beneficiaries in their will. Semantically speaking, they do. But when it comes to legalities, they don't. They're actually heirs. Because the will doesn't own anything, the will can't give it away. The will just says what you'd like to have happen and who you'd like to give it to. The beneficiaries are at the bank because you've asked them to manage your money for you when you're not here. You've asked them to give it away. So they're managing it. They have the beneficiaries. The will has heirs. A trust has beneficiaries. Well, I'll compare a trust to a business. If you've ever owned a business, or I'll just compare it. Let's say you have you own a car dealership or you own a Subway sandwich shop. It doesn't matter. Everything that company owns is yours because you're the owner. That's how a trust works. You can walk into your sandwich shop and eat all the sandwiches you want. If you own a car dealer, you can drive away back and forth in any cars you want because they're yours. And that's how trust works. With a trust, you still buy and sell everything the same way you always did. Nothing changes for you. For you, it's semantics. but for people that might want to interfere, it's a roadblock. So if you and your wife are co-trustees and co-trustors, if one of you passes away, nothing changes. The surviving spouse can actually mourn. In fact, all that work that you normally do when someone passes away, you don't have to do it. There's something called funding the trust, and it just means to put your assets in the trust. That's where one of the ongoing services that Safeguard does. We're going to help you. We're going to put your homes and your properties into the trust. We're going to work with you for your bank accounts and everything in the trust. And we're not getting soft, passwords or anything else like that. We're helping you do it. You're going to stay in charge. We're not ever going to have access to anything. But what we're going to do is help you get it done, and we're going to do it with you. So the trust is going to own your home, and the trust is going to own your bank accounts, and you're going to own the trust. Like I said, you still buy and sell everything the same way you always did. Nothing changes. You write a check normally. But the trust owns it. The beauty of that is when you have a will, for instance, when you pass away, for the moment we've lost ownership, we lost title. With a trust, when you pass away, we do not lose title. Title is maintained by the trust. It owns it the day before you passed away, and it continues to own it the day after. With no loss in title, there's no probate, because probate's job is to establish title. So again, back to the trust, you have the owner and the manager. That's you and your wife, if there's two of you, and you both have full authority to do anything you like. When one of you passes away, nothing changes. When you both pass away, you have to have someone to step up to distribute your assets according to your wishes. Now, they have to follow your wishes. That's why there's two names. Only a trustor can change things, and when both owners have passed away, your trust becomes irrevocable. Nobody can change anything. So you have a new manager that steps up to distribute your assets according to your wishes. They're going to give it to your beneficiaries, and those are the four parts of the trust. If you want your successor trustee to be the beneficiary, that's fine. It's your estate. You can do anything you like. So there's a couple of things in here where Safeguard comes in with our services. Number one, we're going to help put all your assets in the trust, and we're going to help you forever. If you get a new home or you move money from a bank account to another one, please call us. It's a free phone call. We're going to help you protect it. In fact, we're going to call you once a year and ask you, have you made changes? We're going to ask you two questions. How's your health? If your health is okay, have you made changes like bought a home or moved money around? And if you did, we're going to help you protect it. But if you know we're calling in a couple of months, please don't wait. Tomorrow's never promised. The other service we're providing here is if you were to pass away, your successor trustee just calls us, and we're going to settle the estate with them. No charge. It's actually included. We're very fast. We're going to hold their hand and walk them right through it. If you only have one property here in Arizona, our average time of settling an estate is 48 days. We're incredibly fast, but it's a third of our company that's dedicated to that. We might not know what's coming, but we've done it before. And so we're trying to ease that burden. So I'm going to give you some examples here between wills and trusts and how they work. With a will, if you pass away, the time you pass away until your heirs or your beneficiaries get it, that's where you're vulnerable. With a trust, when you pass away, your estate's not vulnerable, period. Nobody can interfere. And you have no contest clauses in there, so your beneficiaries can't argue. If they argue, they lose their share. And we're here to help them understand that very kindly so they don't argue. And if somebody's not listed in there as a beneficiary, there's a no contest clause in there that says you've considered everyone. There is, basically on a personal basis. And if they're not listed in there as a beneficiary, you decide to leave them absolutely nothing. So your estate's not vulnerable. Okay, so I'll give you some examples. Let's say you have 3 children and $3 million, because this is easy for me to explain. I like big numbers. So 3 children and $3 million. And you tell your oldest child, please be a great kid, and give $1 million to each one of your siblings, and you keep 1. And then when you pass away, they're 60 years old, and now they understand the value of $1, their earning potential. Well, what if they go grab this money and decide to keep it? Okay. Well, if you have a will, they didn't break any laws. They didn't do anything illegal. Of course, it's unethical, and they violated your wishes and all of that. But the problem is they did nothing illegal, and they have the money, so there's nothing to probate. So the other kids would have to take them to court. It's called a civil case. And it's really a waste of time, in my personal opinion, that is. because I've seen it too much. Generally what happens is this oldest child has $3 million, and if they're, the kind of person that was going to steal the money, then they're also the kind of person to get an unscrupulous attorney. And they'll tell them, I never want to see a day in court. How much will it cost me? $200,000-$300,000. They get the rest. And this attorney will bounce the other kids in and out of court until they've used up their money. And they probably never get to talk about it. That's generally what happens. But if you have a trust, remember the trust owned the account, and the trust didn't say he can do that. So that person just stole the money. So you understand the difference. They have to give it back. Not just $1 million from each of the other siblings, but all of it. So the other two siblings that would normally get $1 million each now have $1.5 million each. And the child that took the money has other issues to deal with, legal issues. They might have to pay attorneys of their own. But the trust takes care of this, and it doesn't let them get away with it, is what I'm getting at. Where a will has 2 or 3 pages, a trust has like 40 some odd pages. And all these legalities in it holding everyone's feet to the fire. It must be fulfilled. That's the difference. Let's say your oldest child was in a car wreck at 45 years old, and now again they're 60 years old when you pass away. Well, again, if you're giving them $1 million, maybe this car wreck left them injured, and over the years they have drug and alcohol problems. Okay. Well, if you ever had any experience with that, you don't want to give them a large lump sum of money, because that could cost them dearly if they have an addiction problem. So with a will, your options are to give it to them or not. Where with a trust, you can do it however you like. You can give them it over time. You can give them $100 a month or $5 a week every week for the rest of their life. Or you just pay their rent. You know, anything you like with a trust. Now, if you give them $5 a week every week, and you don't change that while you're alive, well, then that's what they get. And again, they can't argue or they'll lose that share. So it's up to you what you want to do with the trust. You can even bribe grandkids to go to college. You know what? How would you like some of grandma and grandpa's money? If you go to school, you go to college, you get this much money. Yeah, if you get a master's, you get this much. If you don't go, you didn't get anything at all. You can do anything you like with this trust. Give you one more example. Let's say you have a great kid, but trouble follows him. He can sit in the back seat of your car in an empty parking lot, and somehow someone's going to run into the car. Well, you'll tell them, hey, listen, when I pass away, give your siblings each their $1 million, but do me a favor, keep your share in the trust. If you need it, take it out. Otherwise, keep it in the trust. See, this trust is allowed to survive you for up to 500 years if you wish. If you're Rockefeller and you want to give away charity for a long time, you can do it. But in this case, let's say you have your oldest child and they keep their share in your trust. So if they want a house, they'll take it out. And if they want to, God forbid, they have medical issues, or they want to buy a car or something, otherwise it's in the trust. Now, when you pass away, a year later, somebody sues this child. Well, they can't touch that money. They could sit down and have coffee with them, tell them the account numbers and the name and everything. They can't touch it, even though they have access, and it's not theirs legally until they take it, even if they're the manager. So nobody can take it, nobody can do anything about it. It's theirs, but it's protected. So you see the advantages. And again, it's still in your trust, so God forbid that child passes away 5 years after you do. It's still in your trust. So your trust will have information in there as to where you'd like it to go if they're not here. For instance, you want to go to their kids? You want it to go back to the siblings? You want it to go charities? You want it to go to any combination thereof? See, our trust, one of the main things we try to do is provide contingencies. And one of the questions is, if your son or your daughter, your best friend, if you're giving them something, where would you like their share to go if for some reason it's 10 or 15 years from now and they were to pass away before you? We're just going to assume it's hard to figure out to change paperwork, and we're going to have something in there for you, because if your child passes, it's not what you're thinking of. You can always change it if you ever want to, but we're going to ask you what you'd like to do and have it built in. We always have contingencies in there. And so that same contingency would last because it's still in your trust. I hope I've given you some good general explanations there. If there's any more specifics, please reach out and ask me. I'll give you one more. I just don't have 3 days and nights to tell you everything. Sometimes we try and protect things by putting our kids' names on our homes, on our bank accounts. We want them to get it. So let's say you put your kids' names on your house, your bank accounts and everything, and I'll give you two scenarios. One of them is one of your kids gets sued. Maybe they get in a car accident, or they go to work and get sued or something. Okay. If that happens, you can lose your home or anything else their name is on because they own it too. Now, the other scenario is that doesn't happen, and you pass away and their name is still there. Well, they'll get the home, but you've exposed them to capital gains taxes. So the way I understand it currently is if your home is worth $350,000 more than it was when you bought it, I think right now capital gains is a little over $86,000. They would now be responsible for that. But if you give it to them through the trust, it doesn't matter what it's worth. If your home is worth $10 million more than it was when you bought it, they get the whole thing, all of it, whether or not you gave them the house or just let the trust split it up in shares. Whoever it is gets all of it. There's no capital gains. You've avoided it entirely. In fact, if they decide to keep the house for another year and it goes up for another $1 million and they sell it, they get that too. They avoid capital gains through the whole thing. They get it all, just like they paid cash. If they kept it for 2 years and it went up the second year, they would only pay capital gains on that second year. That foundation they started with and that first year, they would get that entirely without capital gains. I hope I've explained that enough so that you have a real understanding. But again, I'm gonna tell you this little form you can fill out or ask me questions. I'll give you a call. I'd love to talk to you. If you're interested, I'd love to earn your business, of course. All right, so remember how we started here with a will? Now the same way we start with a trust. Only the difference is now if you get a trust, you have this. Husband and wife have everything, they own it all, and now they also own the trust. Okay. So now Safeguard, we're going to help them take everything out of their name and put it into the trust name. So now we have this. Okay, so here's where the difference is. This time, if the husband passes away, all that work that the wife would normally have to do, I mentioned earlier, there's no work to do. She can actually mourn. Everything's been done. It's the trust owns it, it continues to own it. And it's not vulnerable to anybody making claims or anything else. She's protected. Now, when she passes away, again, the trust still owns it. So there's no interference. There's no probate because their job is to establish ownership, and we haven't lost ownership. So now the successor trustee, whoever you've chosen, it could be your son or your daughter or all 10 of your kids together, it's anything you want. They step up to distribute your assets, and they're going to call Safeguard. We're going to hold their hand and walk them right through it. And one of the reasons why our trust works so great is the way Mark Hall, the attorney, has designed it. Some of you might have gone to attorneys to do things like this before, so you know how it works. You could have the best attorney in the world, but they work hourly and they have to create value. So they talk about everything you own. They build up this whole thing and they have to know everything. And then when you decide to move forward, well, they push it all aside and they go ahead and create the trust. And they give you a letter that says, please go out and protect everything we've talked about. And that's the attorney's job, is making sure he's protected. Ours are a little different. We're not using some software program where they fill in the forms and fill in the blanks that work good for millions of people. What Mark's going to do is we're going to give him 5 minutes worth of information. And we're going to set up an appointment for you to talk to him either on the phone or in person, whatever you prefer. And he's going to ask you if it's correct. He's just going to verify it. If you've changed your mind, of course, you'll tell him the new information. But that's what he wants to know. Is this who you're giving it to? Is this how you spell their names and everything? And now this is where it differs from everyone else. He's now going to wrap the body of the trust around what you want. So fundamentally, it's different. It's based on your own personal family values and what you want to get done. It doesn't work for millions of people. It works for your family. That's how it's designed, and that's why he's been so successful. He's got over 15,000 clients here in Arizona in the last 23 years. And he's got over 9,000 of them have trusts, and not one of them, not a single one has ever gone through probate or been overturned or successfully contested. And that is a track record. Okay, so the reason why the trust works so great is there's no lapse in ownership. Nobody can interfere if nothing's changed. It owns it the day before you passed away, and it continues to own it the day after. No probate. Okay, So remember in the beginning, I said I would talk about two different things. That's protecting your stuff. And of course, you worked your whole life. It should go where you want it to go. Nobody should be able to change that. That's what a trust does, without question. Now let's talk about your living benefits, okay, and how that works. Okay, so how about a will, for instance? This is why a trust has it and a will doesn't. When does a will take effect? Well, it doesn't start until you passed away. Till then, it's just a piece of paper. And even then, it's a letter of intent. It can't enforce itself. But a trust, when does a trust take effect? Well, it takes effect the moment you sign it. The moment you sign it, it's in full force, okay? The moment you sign it, we witness and notarize it. It's now in full force. It's protecting you while you're alive. And if anything were to happen to you 10 minutes later, your homes, your properties are not going through probate. All right. So, living benefits. What if something like this happened? What if you had stroke or Alzheimer's or anything at all? You went to the hospital and couldn't communicate and you got there. Okay, well, you need HIPAA. That's the Privacy Act. So they tell whoever you want what's wrong with you. You need a medical power of attorney to make decisions for you if you can't. Without it, it's not going to happen. If you don't have the right paperwork in place, the hospital in the state of Arizona is in charge. If you do, it's you and your family. That's what we're talking about. What if you're incapacitated? See, those are the big issues. Any of those things happen. If you're prepared ahead of time, because that's what we're talking about, you are preparing for the worst and you're hoping for the best. But no matter what happens, you'll be prepared. And that's what needs to happen. That's really it. So I'll give you some examples. My first example here, of course, is Terry Schiavo. Some of you might remember, and some of you might remember as I talk about her, okay? So Terry Schiavo was 27 years old. She lived in Florida, and she had a massive heart attack. It took almost 7 full minutes for the first responders, or the EMTs they call them, to arrive and resuscitate her. So even though she was breathing, there was no brain activity anymore. She was not there. It was too long. It took too long. So even though that happened, they rushed to the hospital. And the moment they walked in the hospital, the state of Florida was appointed as the conservator. Okay, they're now in charge of the money, Mr. and Mrs. Schiavo's money, and they're paying themselves $1,500 a month from Mr. and Mrs. Schiavo's money to be in charge of it. She's in CICU, cardio intensive care unit. That's $5,000 or $6,000 a day. It's triple that now, and that's probably one of the reasons why the doctor said we don't know what's wrong with her at first. And after 2.5 months, the doctor said she was in a coma, but there was no brain activity. Every doctor I've ever talked to says you can talk to them because they have brain activity. So she wasn't here. That's the problem. Mr. Schiavo had to petition the court for legal guardianship to stop two things: to stop his wife, who's disintegrating, and she's got a feeding tube implanted in her belly button, and of course to stop that outlay of cash. Okay, so he petitions the court for legal guardianship and he wins. The problem is it took 8 years. Okay, $1,500 a month, and his wife's just dissolving. So they pull out this feeding tube, and 3 days later they put it back. This is why some of you might remember her mom. Her mom took him back to court for 7 more years. 15 years. That one's difficult for me. I'm sorry. I'm sure he loved his wife too. 15 years? Okay, so, was it his decision? No, it wasn't. I think it should have been. Was it contested? Yes, it was. It was contested by her mom. And why? Because they didn't have the right documentation. That's the only reason. They didn't have paperwork. There's no other reason. See, a trust establishes conservatorship. It's the only thing that does. Nothing else does. If he had a trust, he would have automatically been the conservator, and the state of Florida can't sit in that seat if it's already full. If they were in some accident together, his successor trustee would be the conservator. And then if not that one, then the next one. See, that seat's not open. Which one do you want? Right? It's either you and your family or it's the state of Arizona. That's it. So let's talk about one more form of incapacity. I'll use myself as an example here. Let's say I passed away and my wife is still here and she's 80 years old and she bumps her head or she trips and falls or she has a car accident or a stroke or also there's a couple of different, dozen things that could happen. But if something happens and some nurse or doctor says that my wife can't handle her own affairs, there's a problem. These days, even a social worker can do that. Well, if they do, there's a problem, and it doesn't matter. I've heard people tell me they're not telling the truth. It doesn't matter. That's not the issue at hand. The issue is they've said it, it's declared, and that's your biggest problem. So, and they don't, we're going to assume they're honest because this is too serious. Okay, so if that happens to my wife, I have a trust. Let's assume for the moment I don't. They would have what's called a local magistrate step up and have a conservatorship hearing. Okay, that's fancy words for a Superior Court judge here in Maricopa County or whatever county you live in. They're going to have a conservatorship hearing. And I've asked them, why don't you appoint the children as conservators? And they've looked at me and told me because they have a conflict of interest. They're spending their inheritance. Well, that's true. But the other side of that coin is the judge is protecting himself. Just like the lawyer with the letter, when they give you a trust that says, go protect everything they talked about. Our letter says, please tell us about it or we can't protect it. We're taking that on. It's different. Well, like the judge in the probate that runs an ad for 6 months, he's protecting himself from someone who might come back and say he didn't do his job. He'll say, yes, I did. So in this case, if they put an attorney in charge, then nobody in your family can say they put the wrong person in charge. So that's why they do it. So plus the attorney's beholden to the judge. So this is what the attorney does. First thing he would do is with my wife, he'll go find out where the money is and collect it. So 401ks, bank accounts, whatever it is, he'll collect it and move it. If I had beneficiaries on any of these accounts, well, they're gone because those accounts don't exist anymore. He gathers all the money up and moves it to what's called a guaranteed account. It could be at Merrill Lynch or Fidelity or wherever he's used to working with someone. But he does it because the judge would be upset with him if the money goes down and it wasn't because he was paying a bill. So the guaranteed account means there's no fees or no stocks or anything attached to it. It can't go down unless he spends it. And his job is to take care of my wife with that money. Okay, so he's moved the money. Now he can keep my wife in her home where she's familiar. He can hire hospice care and monitor that for 24 hours a day. He can monitor my children's visits, monitor everything and everybody. Or he can put my wife in a home and monitor nothing at all and just pay the bills. But we all know what he's going to do, right? And if he wants to, he'll sell the home. Now the estate's over. He'll put the money from the home in the same account. He'll use it for my wife. But there's no beneficiaries on anything. It's over. So there's two issues there now. If my wife gets better, they're not even going to give it back to her. Maybe this happened at 80. She's 83 years old now, and she's feeling like she can handle her own affairs. Okay. They won't give it back. It's a court order. If she wants it back, she has to go argue in open court with this judge who made the order and try and convince him she can now handle her own affairs. And some of the time, that attorney that's about to lose his payday might be arguing against her. That's the one way. The other way, of course, is to have a trust. I have a trust. So if I'm not here, my oldest daughter, Shayna, is automatically the conservator of my wife. The seat's not open. The judge can't step up and have a hearing. It's already covered. If not her sister, Allie. See, the seat's filled. It's either the state of Arizona or it's you and your family. And there's no other two ways about it. That's what we're dealing with today. So because a trust establishes conservatorship, they're out of the picture. It removes the ability for anybody that normally would be able to interfere. Bankers, judges, attorneys, doctors, nurses, social workers are out. You and your family are in, period. Or you and your friends, whoever you've decided. Here in Maricopa County, again, this is right off their Superior Court website. That situation I just described, judges and commissioners assigned to the Probate and Mental Health Department oversee over 9,000 active guardianship cases. They're controlling all their assets. It's over $500 million. And of course, now the attorneys are creating all the active orders for treatment and approving everything. and spending your money for you. So it's either them or it's you and your family. That's it. And you can see, again, this is right off their Superior Court website. They're not shy about it. They get to control all the money. They have no problem. And that's just this one county, over 9,000 people. So when I started, I told you what I was going to share what we're up against. Well, this is the kind of thing we're up against. This is how it works today. When you have living benefits, it includes your healthcare power of attorney, your financial power of attorney. Conservatorship is already established. Authorization of physicians is already established. Your living will is already established. Every bit of it's already established. And it just begs that question, of course, because all we're doing is making sure we're prepared. Doesn't it make sense to protect your estate, to protect yourself? That's what it is. Most of you know Susie Ormond. We know who she is. She's describing our trust. We have a revocable living trust. It's only irrevocable if you're not here. Otherwise, it's revocable. You can change it whenever you like. A revocable living trust allows your heirs to avoid probate entirely. It keeps you in complete control of your finances while you're alive. And as I mentioned earlier, you can control them from the grave if you wish, in any manner you like. And you can always make any changes you want. How it's distributed, who gets it, when they get it, anything at all, who manages it, who's your powers of attorney, every bit of it, it's all up to you. You change it anytime you want. It's your estate, and it's designed around what you want, not some general form, not something that works for everybody. It's based on you and your wishes and your family. I grabbed this page out of a magazine by a company called Kiplinger. They're a very famous firm here in the United States, been here over 120 years, a financial firm. And they're talking about the average cost for a trust like this done by a qualified attorney. And that's right. You know, $2,500 to $3,000, $3,500, that's right. I've seen it for a lot more, and I've also seen it for a little less. You know, it depends. But the truth is, a good attorney like Mark, you know, they earned the right to charge for their time. Mark's a $300 an hour attorney. But because of the way we set this up, he gives you a flat fee. So you pay him one time, you're protected the rest of your life. And we're doing all the ongoing services. So we don't have to have the ongoing fees because we're not the attorney. You can even ask attorney questions. You can call up and say, hey, I need these answers, and Mark will spend that time with you. You know, you call an attorney for 5 minutes, they charge in 15-minute increments. It's a $100 charge a lot of times, not with Mark. You ask some questions, you're getting answers, he's not going to charge you for that. It's a courtesy. So usually, you might want to know what this costs, of course. Our usual fees for something like this is in the $2,000 neighborhood. All of you guys that listen to me today, I can't thank you enough. We're going to offer you a tremendous opportunity. It's actually a great value and a no-risk opportunity, meaning you can get started and there's no risk at all. You're not even obligated right away. So this is what we're offering you. Anybody who's interested here today, if you're interested, your total cost is $995. That includes the funding, all of our services, the settlement services. That includes putting your home into the trust, your main residence. It includes the attorney. It includes everything. There's not a hidden fee in there. The only additional cost you might ever have, like for instance, when we sign you up, if you have a second or third property here in Arizona, those are $120 each. If you have an out-of-state property, that's anywhere from $100 to $200. I would let them quote you after they know where it is. You decide how you want to handle it. But generally speaking, your whole cost here for your home and the attorney, the funding, your medical card that we give you, I'll explain in a second, the settlement, everything is $995, and we don't want a single dime from you to get started. Nothing. I'm going to give you this little web address. You can type into your web browser and hit enter, and it'll bring up this little form, and you'll put your name and phone number in there and any other information. If you're interested in getting started, we'd love to help you do that, of course, but I'll give you a call and answer any questions you have. And I'd love to earn your business. You'll let me know if you're interested. At that time, if you are, I'll set you an appointment on Mark's calendar. Now, you can either be on the phone or in person, or he'll do a Zoom meeting or a FaceTime, anything you like. He'll have an hour available. It's usually anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes because you might have questions, you know. But generally, he's just going to verify and change anything to make sure he knows what you want. Once he knows what you want, if you're happy with him, you'll give him $430. If you can always say thank you, but no thank you, and you're not obligated for anything else. But if you're excited about it and you want to pay him, you'll give him $430. Your balance will be $565. And you won't pay that until the trust is in your hands and you're happy. So for that $9.95, you get a revocable living trust. If you're married, you're both getting a trust. There's no additional fees. You get certificates of trust. Now, that's what we use for your local bank account. Okay, so the local bank won't let us change title. It's a good thing. So you do that yourself. If you have Fidelity or Vanguard or Merrill Lynch, these companies have proprietary language. So you're going to have one of the owners assigned to you as your funding manager. So because they have an idea of what you own and that we want it to stay private, so only one person in the office knows. It's one of the owners, either Tom Perzak or John Owen, and they'll always work with you. So they'll create the certificate of trust. If you have a Fidelity account, for instance, they'll prepare it with their proper language. You'll sign it, we'll witness and notarize it, you send it off, get it on title. Your local bank account, they'll draw it up for the bank, and you'll get these anytime you want. And you'll walk it in there and ask them to put the trust on title. It's that simple. The reason why we use this is the bank wants to see your old trust, and it's none of their business. This tells them that you have a valid legal trust, that you own it and manage it, and who manages it if you're not here. What it doesn't tell them is how much money you have or who gets it, when they get it, do you have any children, and so on. That's none of their dang business. You get a pour-over will. That's a last will and testament. I mentioned that earlier, but it's protected in the trust. So it has two purposes, really, two main ones. First, it lists all of your children. We have customers these days that have given one of their two of their children their share already, or even these days, sometimes they're just so obnoxious, you're going to take them out of your estate. Well, I hope you put them back in before you pass away, but if you don't, they're going to come back and say, they forgot about me, and we're going to say, no, they didn't. They just didn't leave you anything. So we have to acknowledge they exist. And the other thing it's a safety net. So let's say you have money in your bank account, we've already protected it, and you move it. Maybe you move it to a money market or CD, or maybe one of the tellers just upset you that day and you want your money out of that bank. Please call us. Even if you know we're calling in a couple of months, tomorrow's not promised. It's a free phone call and we're going to help you protect it. But if you don't and you pass away, well, it'll catch that and pour it back into the trust, but not before your family gets an attorney probably, but they have to go for a day in court. It might be 6 or 8 months later with all these cases. And the judge will say, okay, and he'll allow the money to pour back into the trust, but he has to approve it. Just let us know and we can avoid it entirely, okay? Because that costs money and time. You get HIPAA, that's the Privacy Act that says if you can't communicate and you're in the hospital, they must tell everybody we're naming by name. A lot of HIPAAs, in fact, every other HIPAA I've ever seen says for them to consider your medical powers of attorney like you, or they intend for them to be treated like you. I don't know why that language is there, but ours says they must tell them, so they don't have no questions. You have a financial power of attorney. It's very powerful. If you're in the hospital or anything, they can pay rent they can collect rent on rental properties. They can legally evict people. They can go so far as voting proxies on stocks if you wish. Healthcare power of attorney says they're in charge, not the hospital. It's you and your family. The living will says if you're on life support and you're terminal, they cannot do what they did to Terry Schiavo. They can't keep you there. Those are your options, not theirs. Preparation, recording of the deed in Arizona, any deeds you want us to, of course. Complete funding assistance now and ongoing. Complete settlement assistance for your successor trustees. They'll call us, we'll hold their hand and walk them right through it. No charge, it's included. An emergency contact card for your wallet. It says emergency contact card. It has your name and birth date on there identifying you, and says in case of medical emergency, please contact the following. And it has the 3 names and numbers of your powers of attorney. When someone ends up in the hospital, the ambulance takes you where they're contracted to. It's not your doctor's office, so leaving these documents there won't help. And the problem is admin is what happens. They drop in an admin, they take 10, 15 minutes to look for medications, however they can help the doctor. And they'll glance for a name, and they usually come back 2 or 3 hours later or longer. With these cards, they find this card right away because they're glancing for a name. In that first 10, 15 minutes, they're going to call your wife, your kids, whoever you have listed as your powers of attorney. And the other issue is they're going to drop the phone and run to the hospital. They're not looking for paperwork. Well, the good news is our name and number's there too, and they call us. And we fax over your HIPAA and your medical power of attorney. It's there before they are. They're in charge when they walk in the door. God forbid they're asked to fill out paperwork when they get there. In the meantime, every bit of this, all of this is included for that $9.95. There's not a hidden fee in there, not a monthly fee, not an annual fee. It's all there. and all those ongoing services included. So we have many of these reviews. I love this, like the first line there, I feel relief now. I did, and within the first few minutes of consulting with Robert, that's me. All right, and they needed a trust. That was great. We have more Better Business Bureau 5 stars. Look, you know, all these things. I always feel like we discussed it. I always feel relief. I feel very relieved. Have a plan now. This one here, Derek, Jeff. You met Jeff. Mark's the attorney. Julie's the office manager. Tom. I mean, we have all these things. You can look us up. They're there. I can't thank you all enough for attending this workshop today. That's the form address right there. I'm going to leave that up for a few minutes, and if anyone has questions, I'll answer them here. Otherwise, I'll give you a call. So please type this form into your browser and just type in your phone number and your name, maybe a little information, hit the submit button, and I'll give you a call in just a little bit and answer any questions you have. If they're personal questions, I'm glad you waited and didn't ask here in this venue, and I'll help you any way I can. If you'd like to, I'd love to earn your business, really would. Again, we don't want a single dime to get started. The attorney's included. I'll just put you on his calendar. He'll ask you a few questions, make sure he knows what you want, and then you'll have your trust delivered and you're done. At that point, they'll start talking about your bank accounts and things to protect, because once the trust is created, we'll have a working title to use. So please type this form into your browser. It's Safeguard Your Estate, one word, http://safeguardyourestate.com/form, and just hit the enter button and it'll bring you right to our form. Probably if you don't even do anything but type in safeguardyourestate.com/form, it will work. And then I'll give you a call in a few minutes, in just a little bit, answer all your questions, and of course, I'd love to earn your business. Anyways, I can't thank you enough for attending this workshop. Thank you so much. Myself and Safeguard thanks you. Would love to earn your business. I'll call you all in a few minutes, everybody that gives me that form. Safeguardyourestate.com/form. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I have a question here. What if you own properties in an LLC? Okay, well, that's great. We're going to protect all of your businesses at no extra charge, okay? So anything they have, all their holdings are automatically protected. So if you own an LLC with 15 apartment buildings, they're all protected. We'll protect the LLC, and the attorney will give you the minutes for the corporation, and it's all included. Thank you. Wonderful question. I'll be here for a few minutes to answer questions. I hope that answered your question, Lynn, and please fill out that form and I'll answer more questions for you. Thank you.